to those students, community members, and educators who are being here for this critical discussion. As a former teacher in the county schools myself, as county executive, and as a dad, I want the same for all of my former students, for all of your children, and for my own daughter, who may hop on the screen at any point tonight. But I want the same for all of those kids, right? I want world-class educational facilities for all of our students and all of our children. And when I ran for county executive, I specifically called for a long-term plan to accomplish just that. And I'm really glad that we did, because as we're learning, the needs across Baltimore County for our learning facilities are so great. And the only way we're going to address all of them is to call them out and develop a long-term plan to do something about it. So that's why I want to thank Paul Mills from Canada Design for being here, along with Sam and Pete from the school system. Paul and his team are nationally recognized experts at this work. And as you'll hear, they are passionate about us helping realize our vision of world-class schools for every child. I also want to recognize Dr. Jennifer Lynch, the county's new director for educational partnership, who will be working with me, with Sam, and with Ken to help implement this outreach plan and to finalize our long-term strategy for our schools. Dr. Lynch comes to us after serving as principal at Hillcrest Elementary School here in Baltimore County. And like me, she shares a passion for the education of our young people and is committed to helping us unleash their full potential. So Jen will be our liaison for all things school system. We'll be advising on education policy, and we'll be available to all of you as we continue forward. But I'm thrilled to have her join our team amid this critical time for BCPS as we continue building on our progress together. Over the past couple of years, I've toured pretty much all of Baltimore County, and I've seen incredible need. Like you, I've seen firsthand severe overcrowding, brown drinking waters in schools that are starting to crumble a little bit into the ground, literally. Unfortunately, in the past, Baltimore County has significantly underinvested in our schools facilities and our state. And as a former teacher, again, I know that we have to do better. That's why we've put hundreds of millions of dollars on the table to both finish the Schools for Our Future program and prepare us to address other long-term needs going forward. So in our first 2 years as county executive, we've provided back-to-back years of record funding for public education, including over $240 million in shovel-ready construction. But we can't proceed on even that, the Schools for Our Future funding, without matching funds for the state. That's why we are continuing our fight in Annapolis in the legislature on the Build to Learn Act, which once we override the governor's veto will provide Baltimore County with it will unlock nearly $500 million in shovel-ready school construction. So we'll be working to reverse that veto and secure the school construction funds we need to advance both projects that have been long promised as well as those that are needed moving forward. Just in thinking about that path forward, Baltimore County and the school system began working with Canada Design to develop this long-term plan for improving and modernizing our schools. We welcome their expertise to help us give an objective view of where we are and where they recommend we go next. The initial work for high school recommendations has already resulted in over 20,000 surveys from across Baltimore County. I think that's more responses than we've seen with any other process we've engaged with here in the county. But throughout this process and in collaboration with all of you, we will be forming a long-term plan to ensure every child, every teacher, every family across Baltimore County has that world-class 21st century learning environment. We need a long-term plan that quantifies our needs, quantifies how much it's going to cost, and brings our stakeholders to the table so that we can address these facility conditions. I don't want to sugarcoat it. This is not going to be an inexpensive undertaking, and we have to come together to find a sustainable and responsible way to pay for the recommendations. Canada Design appropriately is coming in and equally considering issues of equity, school capacity, and building conditions, and devising a plan to help address those conditions collectively. They're coming in to provide us with an unbiased perspective based solely on the conditions of our schools and their ability to provide students with supportive learning environments. As we plan this, we have to have all the voices at our table. This is a plan meant for all communities and all students. It's also very important to me to have our students at the table. They're the ones who are most impacted by the decisions we'll be making, and we have to be intentional about including young people in those conversations. And I want you to know that I am fully committed to meeting the needs of all of our communities in a fair and equitable fashion so that no child, no school community is left behind. So I want to commend you again for being here and encourage every member of the Baltimore County Public School family, past, current, and future, to be a part of the table, to be at the table and be part of the conversation. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on how we set that path forward together. And thanks again for staying engaged. We look forward very much to working with you in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mr. County Executive. For those who have just joined and missed that wonderful, opening from our county executive, thank you for being here. We do have a great agenda the rest of the way. We are waiting on Mr. Pete Dixit from BCPS, who has been having some technical difficulties. But again, in the interest of everyone's precious time, what I'd like to do is announce and unveil for the first time. Our team in county government worked really hard on a video that we're debuting for the first time about the multi-year improvement plan for all schools. And Scott, if you can toggle and pull that up, I'd like to have everyone just indulge us for about 2 to 3 minutes, watch the video, and then I'll kick it over to Paul for additional comment.
Sure thing. Give me 1 second.
I apologize for the pretty significant audio issues with the video. I do promise it's pretty fantastic. And if you have seen in the chat, I will we'll be sure to post that to our URL tomorrow, if not tonight. We'll do it as soon as possible. So Paul, I still don't see Pete Dixit from BCPS, but I do know that his fantastic team of Melissa Appler and Katie Angast are on from facilities. So maybe they can say hi in the chat. But I did want to make sure that BCPS was known that they are represented tonight if Pete is having some challenges connecting. So Paul, with that, I'd like
Sam, I have Mr. Dixit connected. I can't promote him to panelist, but I can unmute him to speak.
Great. That's perfect. Thanks so much, Scott.
I should be able to unmute him to speak. He is not unmuting for some reason. I'm not sure why he's not unmuting. I'm not sure how he's connected. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Dixit, yes, sir.
My apologies for not being there on time, but we have been trying. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know whether you can see me or not.
No, sir, we cannot. We're not getting video from you, just audio.
Okay.
That's okay, Pete. We hear your wonderful voice. Take it away.
That's great. And my apologies again. So I'm not sure where we are on the agenda.
Pete, we heard from the county executive, and we were just about to hear from Paul, so you are right where you need to be, right in the middle. We just watched the video.
So again, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Pete Dixit, and I'm Executive Director for Facilities Management. I'm here to represent our Superintendent, Dr. Williams, and Board Chair, Ms. Scott. They couldn't be here because we have a parallel board session going on the operating budget, so they send their regrets to you. And before I start, I want to express our gratitude to County Executive, Mr. Oseski, for funding this critical study for us. I know our board has been talking about it, and we have been talking to county administration for several years about the possibility of a long-term plan that we call MYIPAS now. So our gratitude to County Executive and his team for making it happen. As all of us know, our needs far exceed the resources available. So before I say anything, on the county side, we have been funded. We have been funded quite a bit in the past, and county administration has made extra efforts to increase their share of the funds. So I just want to acknowledge that on behalf of our superintendent and on behalf of our board. The prioritization becomes a challenge for us because needs are so many. There are some buildings that have a condition issue. There are some buildings that have capacity issue. And then there are other buildings that have educational adequacy issues. So once you look at all of that, it's a challenge to prioritize our building. This plan is going to be able for us to do that. And we hired a company, Canon Design. It was a collaborative effort on our part with the county administration. And we were extremely successful in selecting a company that has extensive experience in this field. So they are looking at building from every aspect that we can think of, including these three pillars. And as we move along, it is the desire of county administration and school board to have extensive communication from communities, because the success of this program depends on participation of our communities. So that's what this thing is all about. And I'm not going to take too much time because I know it's Canon Design that needs to share as to what they have seen. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks thanking the county executive again. Nice to see Jen there on screen. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete. And Paul, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak with you. We'll get through this quickly, but I wanted to share appreciation to county government as well as BCPS, county executive, and all the leaders that, while you're thanking me for putting in work with you guys, for me it's an honor. I'm a proud product of public education, and I have my 3 kids coming up through public education as well. Canon Design is an international architecture and engineering company. We design schools all over the country. While I'm not an architect, I do capital planning and strategic planning with school systems around the country. And I like to tell people, of the 1,000 people that are in my company, I'm the luckiest of all 1,000. That's because I get to do what I care about, and that's working with people who care about the same things that I care about, and that's public education. So it's a real honor to work with you guys, and full commitment to work tirelessly with team to make sure we have a great process here. Multi-year improvement plan for all schools. Apologies about the video not coming through. I do hope everyone is able to download this and stream it at your convenience in a way where you can hear the words of the students and some of the issues that are present. So the agenda tonight is rather simple. Really, it's a plea for help. You've heard a bit about MYIPAS and what it's about. It's a long-range planning process. It really is closely tied to what we call the CIP, or Capital Improvement Program funding request process, which is very detailed and includes the county and the state. But at the end of the day, what it's about is securing the money necessary to deliver capital projects. That means construction. That means renovations of buildings, fixing up things that are broken, adding to and improving existing facilities, or building whole new facilities outright. What's critically important as part of this process, as the county executive alluded, this is about equity. This is about making sure that we're bringing up the conditions of all schools for all students through the lens of equity. Also very important to the process is maximizing the amount of state funding available. Your county government right now invests hundreds of millions of dollars, and every chance we can to maximize the money in addition to that from the state is a benefit to all the students. The 3 pillars of study that are fundamental to this work are the educational adequacy and equity. That refers to how well equipped the buildings are to address all of the human scale needs that are present in the building. How educationally sound, do you have all the right types of specialized spaces to support the sorts of curriculum and instruction that's happening in the building? Is it set up for just human wellness? Does it have the right amount of daylighting, et cetera? Is it set up with the right amount of security that we want to see for all the students? And also looks at, does it have the features that we see in modern facilities now that support the sorts of very interactive and flexible modes of learning and instruction that are happening in the schools now? The second pillar is the facility condition, and as the name would imply, this really speaks to the physical health of the building. We've sent teams of architects and engineers, construction experts out into the field who do nothing but this sort of work around the country. They looked at the building all the way from the foundation up to the top of the roof and from fence line to fence line to look and make sure that they're addressing the condition needs that exist in the schools. And third is the capacity utilization. What that refers to is how quote-unquote big the school is, or how many students the facility can support based on the sorts of educational program that's going on in the school and the amount of space that exists in the school. What's really important, kind of a fourth ingredient to this, we have a bunch of data, which becomes information, and when really brought through a process that's integrated where the stakeholders get to participate and understand, really that information gets elevated to a point of wisdom that can lead towards innovative solutions. With that, it's so important that everyone is stakeholders, from students, parents, teachers, administrators, community members, business leaders. Everyone who has a stake in the success of these schools participates in the process and has an opportunity to do so. And we work very closely, even during these challenging times that we're operating in right now, to design a process where we can actually achieve a high degree of engagement. So our role in this process, well, I mentioned the architects, engineers, and folks that went out into the field studying your buildings. We also facilitate the planning process and engagements. But at the end of the day, we provide impartial, unbiased, apolitical recommendations. So the process was deliberately set up in two phases. The first phase concluded last fall with the presentation of initial recommendations for high schools. And that was very intentional as part of the process. As you may know, every single year there's a funding request cycle that happens with the state and a biennial cycle that goes with the county to apply for and get approval for the funding necessary to deliver these capital projects that we mentioned. Because we started at early of 2020, we knew that there was an opportunity to actually have some of the early results from the process impact this current CIP planning and funding cycle. So it was very intentional to have that initial snapshot of recommendations, and it was specifically focused on the high schools. Phase two is really exciting. We started right after finishing phase one. That same team that completed their studies in the field of all the buildings for the high school level continued on and went into your middle schools and elementary schools to validate the conditions and adequacy of those buildings as well. Moreover, we worked very closely with county government as well as Baltimore County Public Schools internal leadership to design as integrated and transparent and participatory a process as we possibly could achieve through this two-dimensional world that we've been operating within. And we're very proud of the results. So we're here tonight to really share with you what that roadmap looks like moving forward, and to ask, please weigh in. The benefit and value of this sort of plan really is only achieved and maximized through broad-reaching participation of stakeholders involved. So here's kind of what it looks like. If you can imagine that this process represents a partnership between the institutions that are serving the community and the community itself, each of those has a committee. So the first group is the Focus Group Summit, which is a composite group of 3 focus groups that were aligned with those 3 pillars of study we mentioned earlier. This group, it represents the institutions. And these folks are working, their day job is to do all the hard work of operating and educating and delivering all the services that are so valuable to communities through the schools. The Focus Group Summit 1 kicked off this week and was really started with the foundation of the principles and values, not my school, your school, but what's important for all students. Very engaged dialogue, even in this two-dimensional world, with a lot of powerful conversation that's going to feed into the process. The Stakeholder Advisory Committee is that other sister organization, works in partnership with the Focus Group Summit. And this is cross-representational of the entire community, or the users of the school buildings. By that I mean the students, the parents, the teachers, principals, community members, everyone that's impacted by the schools and their communities have representation on this committee. It's intentionally designed with representation from all of the various corners of Baltimore County so that there's no marginalized voices. Now, it doesn't stop there. This is where it really brings on you as community members. We need everyone to participate in this process. And because of that, while having a stakeholder advisory committee of your peers, we have 4 opportunities, including tonight, to be able to engage and be informed and actually provide feedback into the process. So the benchmarking aspects of the work speak to the 3 pillars of study that were out there, and the weighting of the data and to provide benchmarking scores among all the schools was informed by the 22,000 plus survey responses that we received last July, including, we're proud to say, 2,500 students who participated in that process. This was conducted in 9 different languages, and with 22,000 responses, literally from every single school community within Baltimore County Schools. We have a statistically relevant sampling of all the different perspectives that were weighing into the criteria. And that was used to do the weighting of the benchmarking data that we've provided in our recommendations. How is this used? It helps design the criteria for the sorts of outcomes and options that are potential as outcomes of our recommendations. It also helps define what the renovation scope can be. And I'll use the term gap analysis. What that means is every school ought to have this, and these few schools don't have it. Well, guess what? The benchmarking score elevates the need and ranking of those schools and identifies the costs it would take to create those amenities that are missing. Or if there's a broken roof or air conditioning system at one school, the same sort of gap analysis is used to make sure that there's an appropriate amount of funding that's planned. Also important is the sequencing of work. As Pete mentioned, there's just not all the resources that we could take care of all this need right away. So it's going to have to be very methodical and planned out in a way that's fair and equitable across the whole county. And by this, we have this data-driven aspect to measure the relative need of all schools in a way that's equitable. That helps us ensure that those with the most need are addressed first. So how can we get engaged? It started tonight with our community forum number 1, and we understand that perhaps not everyone that wants to participate in this process had the opportunity to log in tonight. By this being recorded and posted, we hope that more and more people are able to be passed along. But I do have a plea to all of you. Please talk to your family and friends. Please let them know about the importance of this process. The students that you heard from earlier in the video, and when you're able to log and stream it on your own time, all 115,000 students that we have within the system, every one of them are important, and they really deserve your full attention into this process. So it started tonight with Community Forum 1. This is just a splash to let you know that it's coming, and please take the opportunity to engage. Let me describe what the rest of the roadmap looks like. Community Forums 2 and 3 are the ones that are really important to attend. You can make time on February 3rd and on April 8th. Time's about 2.5 hours from 6 to 8:30 both evenings. These opportunities to engage are not either or. They're actually additive to each other, so I hope you can participate in both of them. Community Forum 2 is very intentional. It's set up to take that survey we had in July and dive a little bit deeper into some of the issues that are confronted by Baltimore County Public Schools, and to do a live poll and survey that's centered around small group discussion. What does this mean? Through technology, we're going to divide up into groups of people from all walks and areas of Baltimore County Public Schools, students, teachers, parents, et cetera, community members will be able to log in and have dialogue around these issues. And on Community Forum 2, we're not talking about the needs of this school versus that school. It's not a zero-sum game, but rather what's important for all schools? What sorts of decision criteria ought to be out there? What are universal needs that we must address equitably across the system? The real planning work, where we're taking all the 3 pillars of data and looking through all those middle schools and elementary schools, and some of the intentionally laid out due diligence projects from the high school phase, that planning work won't happen until after that Community Forum number 2, and the survey that will be left open afterwards. So if people were unable to attend Community Forum number 2, they will have the opportunity to weigh in through the surveys. The planning work will happen after that information and that data is compiled, so that we have complete disaggregated, statistically relevant data about the perspectives and values that's localized to each of the school communities in the area. Then we'll go through the planning cycle that'll be iterative, in which both of the committees I mentioned earlier will work in partnership to develop and edit and refine and vet different operational scenarios that are outcomes here. By that it means there are choices, option A, option B, option C. It's not a, here's the plan, I hope you like it. So Community Forum 3 will give you the opportunity to attend and sit in small group discussion, and also to review the sorts of options that are out there and discuss the relative benefits, the challenges, the costs associated with achieving these projects, and to weigh in through the polling mechanism, a way so we can, as planners, see the relative support or lack thereof of all these different options that are out there. Then the final decisions will get resolved by the two committees and brought forward to the board and county council. But it doesn't stop there. The hard work that you put in to weigh in and talk through with your communities and peers out in the community, we'll honor that with reporting back what the final results are. And that'll be sometime in June. We didn't want to lock in a date quite yet. We'll certainly do that as we get closer to it. But with that, it's a real honor to work with you, and we'll entertain any questions that you might have about this process. We do hope that you weigh in and have the time to participate in the community forums. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. Mr. County Executive, yes.
I'm good, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, I thought you were waving to be called on. So thank you for that. I'm going to do my best there's a couple of different sources by which the questions are coming in. So we've got about 20 minutes to engage in a Q&A with Paul. Pete Dixit from BCPS should still be on the line. So there are a few questions relevant to the facility space. So I'm just going to kick things off with the first. And Paul, I think I'd like you to address this first, and then Pete, if you can piggyback. There was a question that came in through the chat about replacement versus addition versus new construction, and if Shannon was informed of fiscal restraints prior to maybe phase one, or as a part of the planning process at this point. Can you address just how those decisions are sort of factored in, the fiscal restraints?
Absolutely. So fiscal constraint is central to this. There are a lot of desires to maybe achieve more than can be afforded. And we want to look at what available funding is available to there and make responsible recommendations based on the availability of funding. Now, House Bill 1 with the Built to Learn Act and the veto, that it could potentially be a game changer, reducing maybe by half the timeline it would take to achieve a lot of the projects. But still with that, there certainly are limited resources and recommendations for the extent of the outcomes in the recommendations will be throttled by that.
Thanks. And Pete, or if you're unmuted, if you wanted to add any more to that.
Thank you, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think Paul has covered it very well. I just want to add a few things in there. There's a perception out there that renovation or addition is really a patch-up job. And I just want to state here that when we do renovation or addition, it is not a patch-up job. We have done extremely successfully all kind of projects, new construction, renovation, and addition, and they have been accepted by the community very well, and they have met all the educational requirements that we need to meet. So there should not be a misconception out there that renovation is just a patch-up job, if that helps.
Thanks, Pete. If you can just stay off mute for a second, there's another one that I think I'd like you to address. It's about accessing facility condition studies for each school. Will those details be made available, or just the aggregate score?
I think Paul can answer that question. We have a lot of details and engineering notes that Paul and his team have completed. So all of that putting on the website with WCAG compliance is a challenge for Canon Design, but they are working on a solution where details will be summarized in an understandable manner, and they should be on county and school board website in near future. Paul, you want to add anything to it? Feel free to do that.
Absolutely. This is like math class where we're required to show our work. We didn't make up these numbers. There is rationale in math and observable engineering science behind all of these numbers, and the details behind the scores are documented in our systems and will be transparently available to all the stakeholders.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, I'm toggling to the Q&A portion now. This is very fun and very challenging. There was a question about the different opportunities to participate. So, Paul, in the slides you described the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, the Focus Group Summit, and then obviously we've got these more robust community forums. Can you talk a little bit more about the composition of the SAC, and also describe truly what people are going to experience on the forum piece? Because I think you've designed something that's supposed to be more interactive, less presentation, right, and sort of the static Q&A, which, again, I appreciate everyone's comments, but can you just describe why that process is important and how it's going to work?
Absolutely. So the way we do planning, even when we're in person, is to maximize the opportunity for people to engage in dialogue, to understand that there are some challenges out there that are universal, but there's also some challenges that are unique. We all live within our own school communities, but when you have a large, diverse area like Baltimore County, it's so critical that we have different perspectives and the opportunity for folks to really understand those mutual and different and unique challenges that are out there. And that's why we've intentionally set this process up, even using Zoom technologies and things where we can actually use breakout rooms and get folks into that small-scale dialogue without it becoming a whole universe or room full of people that really don't have the opportunity to engage. The composition of these committees was designed in close collaboration with Baltimore County Public Schools and county government. We as consultants, we kind of described what we wanted the composition to look and feel like based on best practices. And I must say that the intentionality that was put into assembling these committees was superb. Very intentional geographical breakdown and the roles we have here, starting with students. Very intentionally, we have a very overt student outreach component of this work. And if I can observe, their participation has always been, first of all, the most relevant voice, and they also keep us adults on best behaviors when they're logging in. And it's amazing when their voice and their weighing in, their prescient thoughts and questions will drive us to really achieve some great things in this process. Now, it's not just students and not just consultants and internal folks, it's families, it's community members that are actively involved. And I'm real proud of the work that my client, the folks at Baltimore County Public Schools and county government achieved in assembling those committees.
Thanks, Paul. And just to piggyback off of the community forum piece for a second, another related question is about community forums 2 through 4. And are they targeted to just the elementary and middle school stakeholders and users, parents, students, things like that? Or will you be looking, again, at high schools and other types of schools?
That's a great question. Anyone is welcome and invited to participate in the process. Now, while the bulk of the planning work will be focused on the elementary and middle schools that weren't looked at during phase 1 by design, but there were some recommendations for further due diligence to look at some of those challenging issues, particularly as it related to areas with capacity needs. There's the opportunity in those spaces to go through different pathways and to hastily, without the appropriate amount of due diligence with outreach to stakeholders, with looking at real estate availability that's out there to arrive at the best and most relevant and supported outcomes for those high schools, is still in the recommendations, and we anticipate delving into those issues as well. So long answer to a short question, please, everyone participate.
And Paul, not to keep you on the hot seat, but we had a similar question last week, actually, when we had a different forum, and it has to do with engaging stakeholders with limited resources, or for example, internet connectivity. A lot of people are juggling other priorities. So can you just describe, and I can also answer this too, but can you just describe how we're looking to cast the net wide for engagement?
Absolutely. I mean, just as this pandemic has taught us here, it really kind of ripped the roof off and let us look at a lot of inequities that are out there, including disparities of access to technology. And while the great majority of us can log in and participate like we are right now, there's so many that just don't have that, or don't have the bandwidth or the privacy or the devices to be able to do that sort of thing. Recognizing that those issues do exist, we're working very closely with Baltimore County Schools to make sure we have avenues through the normal school outreach networks to be able to make sure there's an opportunity to participate. And if it means collecting survey data on pens and paper, so be it. That's what we'll do. Another part of this technology is that we can pull down kind of a snapshot of participation in these surveys as they're rolled out, and analyze based on voluntary indications of what neighborhoods folks come from, what schools they associate with, what their relationship is to, whether they're a student, parent, teacher, et cetera, what language they're participating in, what ethnicity and background they come from. That enables us to look at the data and compare it to the profile of your student enrollment and see if there's any underrepresented cross-sections of the community. We do that at kind of at a midpoint in the survey process and towards the end, which will inform some targeted outreach that might be necessary to make sure that we have representational and proportional response to the surveys.
Thanks, Paul. I know that, through that stakeholder advisory committee too, we'll be leaning on those members of the community to help provide us with additional recommendations for, you don't know what you don't know, right? And we can be very intentional through the County Executive's Office of Community Engagement, who are doing a lot of activities, in sort of food insecurity spaces, still having ability to connect with community members. But we know that, again, if you're looking at the hierarchy of priorities and needs, there's a lot on everyone's plate. So just trying to get participation and be thoughtful about it, I think is, what we're going to continue to remain focused on. County Executive, I actually have a question about sort of timeline generally that I thought you could speak to. Obviously we're in the beginning stages of the budget development process. Can you just speak broadly to your, sort of the point at which you receive BCPS's budget, when you present to the council, and then ultimately how the public can be engaged in that process?
Sure, and I think that the presentation earlier sort of spoke to two things. There's both a long-term capital improvement plan, the CIP, which is sort of different but related to the annual budgeting process. So as far as the annual budget goes, on the school system side, there are currently conversations happening within BCPS where Superintendent Williams has produced his recommended operating and capital budgets to the school board. The school board has had hearings and conversations. I believe actually tonight is one of those conversations about the BCPS budget. And once the school board finalizes that budget, at that point it then is sent over to BCPS, from BCPS to county government for review and consideration alongside all of the other agencies. As BCPS is contemplating its budget, all of my other agencies are creating theirs in partnership with our county administrator, our Department of Budget and Finance. What I do in that moment is I'm actually, and many of you, I see some names that are very familiar, have been to our town halls where we've sort of turned budgeting on its head a little bit in Baltimore County, where we go out to all 7 council districts alongside council members, although with COVID, it'll probably be virtual this year, to give a presentation and update on where we've been, and then also turn the floor over to you about where we're going. So in the same way that we try to engage all of you, we went from 2 people testifying on the budget to literally hundreds of thousands of people being engaged in our budgeting process. That's what MYIPAS is meant to be. It's meant to be collaborative. It's meant to be iterative. And so I think that this sort of is very much sort of in the same spirit of that town hall style budget engagement process. So I listen to the communities as agencies and BCPS finalize their budget and submit. We do final reviews after I finish the town hall series, and then based on sort of the constraints provided by the county council provides a spending affordability, a different SAC, not to be confused with the SAC the SAC we're talking about here. But they give me spending guidelines that they request that we stay in to be responsible within our budgeting limits. And then from there, I submit a budget to the county council in April, and then that budget is then finalized in May after the council deliberates of the budget submitted, and then that fiscal year takes effect July 1st and runs until the end of June 30th. So that's sort of just a high-level update on the budgeting process. And there is, again, CIP is meant to inform the budget long-term, but there's also those yearly decisions vis-a-vis schools and BCPS.
Thank you, sir. A great, thorough answer. If Pete is still on the line, I've got another question that I'd like him to answer if possible. And Paul, this is certainly relevant to sort of projection of how long these projects take to come to fruition. There's a question regarding the timeline. Elementary and middle schools seemingly are able to come online a little faster, but new high schools, for example, take much longer, up to 10, 15 years. Why is that? And it's not intended to be a loaded question, but just Pete, if you could sort of address maybe square footage and other needs and considerations, or Paul, if you want to hop on and take that, I'd appreciate it.
No, I'll be glad to answer that question, Sam, if I may.
Great.
Funding and construction, they are all related. There's so much money that we get every year from state and county, so that's one piece. Design takes anywhere from 12 to 15 months to meet all the state requirements and reviews and all the county requirements. Once design is completed, it takes approximately 2 summers for an elementary school, and this is on accelerated schedule, and about 3 summers for middle school and 4 summers for high school. And this has to do with the size of the school. Elementary schools are around 100,000 square feet, plus minus 10,000. Middle schools are 150,000 square feet, and high schools are 250, 270,000 square feet. So larger the school, the more the construction time. So we try to accelerate it as much as we can, but this is the approximate timeline that I just shared with you.
Great. Paul, I'm going to switch gears back to a community forum related question for you. In terms of input that we're getting at these forums, will they be used to design the options, or will the options have already been developed with certain parameters and folks will be reacting?
That's a great question, and it really speaks to what's unique about this process is you actually get both opportunities. Community Forum 2 happens before the planning work happens, and that's so that we can get a pulse of what values and decision-making criteria ought to be before the planning happens. So that can be a lens peered through and fundamental to some of the outcomes that are reached. Then after that design work is done, a series of options will be presented to the community where you have the opportunity to weigh in and say, I like A better than B, or I like C better than B. So you do have both opportunities baked into this process.
Thanks, Paul. We got a really thoughtful suggestion from one of the attendees on the call tonight, who she's offering to have folks come out to do surveys as part of the Student Support Network food drive. So we are very familiar with that organization. It's, everyone's doing such great work in this space. And that's a great idea. We the county executive, made it his mission to address this issue really early on in the pandemic, and we have used it as a way to do outreach, on giving out PPE, raising awareness in different languages about our Be Safe to Stay Safe campaign, and then also putting messaging out about COVID testing. And now that vaccines, our registry is up and live, encouraging folks to sign up for that. So great suggestion. And this is why I'm so thankful and appreciative that we've got such a dedicated group of folks on tonight's call. We can't do this alone, and you all know best what is happening in your own communities. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and I realized that I did not get to everyone's question. And I apologize for that, but there is that email address that I mentioned earlier. I can put it in the chat for everyone. The comment form will be live and available throughout this process. If there's something burning that we haven't addressed, please email. We'll do our best to get back to you. Mr. County Executive, I'd like you to just provide some closing remarks, if you'd be so kind.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks again to everybody. And I want to reassure you that Sam and Paul and Jen will be following up with any questions that have been asked that weren't directly answered in this time that we have. But this really isn't wrapping up. This is just the beginning of a really critical conversation about the future of our county. I'm so grateful that we have so many dedicated parents and educators and activists here who are taking the time to be a part of this conversation. We want this to be real. We want this to be funded, and we want this to be sustainable. And so if you know anything about me, I try to operate with transparency and openness in all that we do. I hope that you find this process that's an extension of that. We will avail our team if there are follow-up conversations that need to be had. But this process is meant to be iterative, collaborative, and community-centered so that we give every single school community the schools they deserve. So, again, thanks for making the time, everybody, and we look forward to following up to questions and the next community meeting that we have scheduled as outlined tonight.
Thanks so much. And I know that I gave you the last word, sir, but I had one housekeeping item. I did notice that there actually were some members from the SAC, Paul, who joined us tonight. And again, if there are additional questions that either we can answer, but again, those members are intended to be an extension of the community. So if you are a member of the SAC and have additional questions that were not addressed, but want to bring that to our first meeting, that would be great, and that's a great space to bring that up. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm ending a minute early, so congratulations, you get a minute of your evening back. This has been recorded, so we will post the recording on the website as well. And with that, thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone. Be safe.